radio station we're in would have acoustical design to it to make sure that the background sound is quiet, so the air conditioning doesn't interrupt the important things you guys are saying.
Why is that bothering you? That air conditioning?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's actually a quietly selected piece of equipment. But almost any building you can think of has some sort of acoustical aspect to it. And whether or not it's important to the program and whether people recognize that is sort of the question. But we have a lot of clients that, most of our clients are architects, engineers, or building owners. And we work with them basically to improve the acoustics of spaces to make their programs work more effectively. And that might be a higher education facility, it might be a corporate facility, it might be a healthcare facility. A lot of residential work. So there's sound that impacts people in almost any building you can think of.
Now, if they're consulting with you about the acoustics, is it usually because they have either some kind of a video program that they use, or if they have speakers, or is it just like a real office space?
It can be any of those. Certainly, spaces that have recording or some sort of performance element to it are typically thought of as acoustical products or projects. But gosh, probably 70-80% of our work is on non-acoustical projects that involve corporate office spaces, healthcare facilities, making sure people can rest and recover and actually feel healthy when they leave a hospital. But also residences.
That would be helpful.
Exactly. That's sort of a financial benefit of
Right.
the hospital, is to get people out and healthy and recovered. But a lot of our work is also making sure that multifamily residential projects function for people to feel separate, even though they're living with a neighbor right on the other side of a wall. So the mill building conversions that you're seeing happen all over the place, we're helping them work so that the person walking around on the floor above you doesn't make it feel like they're walking in the same room as you. So things like that. And then we also get into specialized projects for courthouses or government facilities, Defense Department work. So it's really broad. It's a neat business to be into because it's problem solving for almost anything you can think of in architecture, but also for my colleagues for products. We've worked on quieting toothbrushes to make them sound like a good toothbrush, an electric toothbrush, mind you.
Yeah, because my regular toothbrush doesn't make a lot
Doesn't
of noise.
make much sound. But, we help make washing machines sound quieter or better, or lawn mowing equipment. So it's really exciting because acoustics plays a part in our lives, whether we realize it or not. It can influence you to buy something. It can influence you to stay away from something. So,
Right.
And along with the more typical, you want a performance to sound good when you go see the performance.
Right. I would say if I was a landscaper right now, I would pay for a landscaper with equipment that was soft sounding, like the
blowers.
the hedge trimmer. You know,
Yeah.
the one that goes
Yeah.
around and you take the last pieces like
Well,
by the beds.
they had those.
Yeah.
They had those that were very quiet.
Yeah.
They were clippers, you know.
Yeah. That takes off for a long time, and mowers. But my question before you mentioned that part was apartment buildings, condos, and offices, all of those where you can actually hear people through walls and stuff. You work on stuff like that to negate all that, so you feel like this is your center of the world, nothing else around you, even though you're right next door.
Yes, and to some extent, the challenge is budget versus what we can build for isolation. So we never talk about things being soundproof, because soundproof gives you the connotation of eliminating sound transfer, but managing the sound transfer to a level of expectation that people would be
on our show. We have no budget, Jeff.
Well,
it's an unlimited budget, so give me that plan now.
No, you were right the first time. We have no budget.
No, so because I always think about that. Like sometimes I'll sit in my office and I'm about to get on a phone call, but I can actually hear the person next to me on their phone call, and that kind of is distracting at times. So I can see a lot of companies thinking, especially with sales. Like, I want to make sure my salespeople don't hear anybody else. They can only hear their phone and in their conversation.
Yeah, and the big driver these days is having people in open work plans.
I was just going to say that.
So having all these people in essentially the same room all together, And some of those people might be on the phone talking with other people, but some might actually have to do concentrated work and produce things, whether it's a report or documents. And you need quiet for concentration.
Right.
So we can help introduce either talk with people about workstation barriers, which these days have been getting shorter and shorter, or talk about the sound-absorbing materials on the ceiling or possibly wall surfaces. But more likely, it's helping to cover up the sound with things like background sound.
Right.
And the white noise systems are things that we might help.
Do you go in and do you know, just based on when you walk into an office, how sound absorbing the ceiling tiles may be, or the wood itself in general, the glass that sits in front of people's office, things like that?
Well, we certainly know the general sound reflection and absorption characteristics of many materials. Whether we recognize what the tile is dependent on whether it's obvious or not. But we can go into situations and have an intuitive feeling for the situation based on what the materials are.
Right.
And again, the biggest factor for offices is often that it's way too quiet. And that quietness lets you hear people and give you the sense of noisiness, even though actually it's really quiet in the background. But the noisiness comes from distraction. And to make that office more productive, typically it's covering up those noises that are distracting you so you can concentrate better and be more productive.
Wow.
So it's
there
not necessarily...
goes a lot into acoustics, I see.
Yeah, it's fun because it's a problem-solving situation, and everyone's got a different way of doing things, so it's always a new problem to solve.
So you have to know what kind of materials absorb what type of sounds? Or?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and that plays a big factor for designing spaces for where sound needs to sound good within that space. And then the other aspect is when we're trying to isolate different spaces, we need to know how much those materials are blocking the sound and what are the wall components that go into the construction for reducing that transmission to other spaces. So yeah, we're looking at both what's reflected, what's transmitted, what's absorbed, and also sometimes what's diffused. So you might think of some radio stations you've been to where there are all some really neat wood panels that have a lot of texture to them. And those are often helping blend the sound within the room and scatter the sound, which is also another aspect that we might look at.
So going back to the open space offices, because that's the big thing right now, that must be a challenge.
It is, and there's a lot of push to have employees work communally, thinking that it's good to be together, collaborate, be able to talk with people quickly to spread information. But that information that people are communicating to each other may be useful for the two people who are talking or three people, but boy, there might be someone right next to them that's really just trying to focus on something. And you see a lot of younger generation just keep their earphones on all day.
Yeah, that's true.
And some people do it that way, and maybe that music in the background is helpful. We tend to find there is research that says that music is still distracting you, even though it's a pleasant distraction, and you may find it something that you're comfortable with. It may keep you from being concentrated on the work you're trying to do. So
it also aggravates your other employees who are trying to talk to you, and you can't hear them because you have things jammed in your ears.
Yeah.
You know, you call out, you're like, oh, hey. You know, now I got to walk all the way. Or if you try to call somebody, and you're like, oh, it's weird. And they're not at their desk. And then you walk over and they're sitting at their desk, and you're like, why didn't you pick up the phone? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Well, now you're not doing your job. You know, that's I can see that too. My other question was, what's easier, going in and fixing the acoustic problem within a building that's already designed, or going in pre-development and building an acoustic set, even though you don't know who's going to rent that space?
Well, typically we work for the people who are fitting out the space. So take, for example, downtown. We're doing a lot of corporate offices that are moving around in the musical chairs that are happening these days. And so we'd be hired by the architects who are fitting out that space for the tenant who's moving in. And it's certainly easier to solve problems in the design phase. You still grapple with budgetary issues and aesthetic challenges. Acoustical materials don't always look the way architects want. But dealing with those challenges in the design is far easier than trying to solve it after people have moved in.
Right.
The place is occupied, and you really don't want contractors coming back in.
Right.
So, probably let's say 80% of our work is design work.
Okay.
20% of our work is fixing problems that are already occurring out in the field and trying to actually get back to a solution that might have been done before, just hadn't been thought of.
Yeah, I mean, that would be... I wonder how many times that's missed, though, you know? It must be... Well, probably now more that you guys are out and promoting this and pushing this, but I would assume it must have been like, oh, what do you mean acoustics? And then you realize once it's... Now, do you have some way to show differences of, like, this is what your room sounds like now, fix this, and this is what it could sound like?
So for years upon years, we had a lot of graphics and a lot of visuals that we could put numbers together to show you the numbers. But about 10, 15 years ago, our company was really excited with some of the modeling technology. And a good example of applying that modeling technology was at the MFA Museum, where basically they put on that new wing of America's Wing, our Arts of the America's Wing. And the big glass courtyard where they have a cafe in the center that connects from the old museum to the new museum was originally proposed by the architect from Europe. And we looked at it and said, gosh, you're going to have 500 people for a fundraising dinner and expect they're going to understand what's being asked of them? And we said, you know what, all the numbers we can give you isn't going to explain the situation. So we actually modeled that space in a way that we could then translate it to something you could listen to. And you could listen to it with the design that was being proposed, and then we could make recommendations to the finishes and the surfaces that would make them more absorptive. And you could listen to it again and say, wow, that's what we want. We have to make some changes. And that was actually an exciting project for us because it was the traditional balance of, the architect would like it one design aesthetic, which is very clean and very nice looking. And we wanted it in a different direction with more sound absorption. And in the end, there was a balance of the two, which is working out fantastically. If you ever get to visit the Shapiro Courtyard, it's really a neat space because you can go in there and if they have a fundraising event or something is done in which they're trying to convey information and communicate to people, you can hear it clearly, even though you're in a big glass box.
Right.
So
that's
it's
the Museum of
exciting.
Fine Arts, by the way, Rick, the MFA. I didn't know if you knew that. Just wanted to break that down.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
I knew you were over there. You looked confused when you said MFA, and I think you were thinking, multifamily assistance, but it wasn't.
No.
It's the Museum of Fine Arts.
But it could have been multifamily assistance.
It could have been.
as
That's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
why I know in our industry, that's the first place you go to, the commercial real estate industry for all your acronyms.
Well, right now I want to go to a break.
Okay. I think that's a GTB.
No, you have to explain to me. What's GTB?
What? Going to break.
Oh, going to break. Oh, my God, Eric. We're talking with Jeff Fullerton. He is a principal consultant in acoustics at Centec, and we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
Rick Kaplan and Eric Wilson, right here on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
Rochester, New Hampshire is one of the fastest growing communities on the seacoast of New Hampshire, and we are attracting new merchants, services, and amenities for our growing number of businesses. We are also maturing as a regional commercial center for the Southern Lakes region of New Hampshire and adjacent territory. Our strategic thinking and natural attributes combine to make a powerful business case for why your business should choose Rochester, New Hampshire. Visit thinkrochester.biz. Again, that's thinkrochester.biz.
Pat Boone here with a word about bank safety. You think your money in the bank is safe? Don't bank on it. A generation ago, bank account felt secure and they paid interest. This encouraged the virtue of thrift and saving. But today, bank accounts pay virtually nothing. and have shifted from low risk to high risk. For example, did you know your money deposited in most U.S. banks could be subject to limited withdrawal and even confiscated by existing executive orders? Oh, yes. And that's just the first of 19 risks explained in a new 32-page white paper entitled Don't Bank on It. Still think your bank's deposits are safe? Get this vital new white paper now.
Call toll-free 800-519-6271. That's 800-519-6271.